Hi, my name is Dan and this is my latest book from Barrington Stoke. It's called The Beast of Harwood Forest. And in The Beast of Harwood Forest, Pete, Nancy and Krish, who you may have read about in The Invasion of Crooked Oak, but if not, it's okay, the stories can be read separately. So Pete, Nancy and Krish, along with the rest of their Year 8 group, go on a school residential trip to a place called Heathland Camp. And on their way to Heathland Camp, Pete, Nancy and Krish notice in the forest opposite the camp, they notice some rather dark and dangerous looking derelict buildings, which they learn are an old place called the Harwood Institute. And of course this immediately piques their interest, but even more so when on their first night at Heathland Camp they hear strange screaming sounds coming from the forest, and they decide that they will go and investigate. And what they discover is a rather sinister secret hidden in Harwood Forest. So I'm going to read you an excerpt from The Beast of Harwood Forest now. And at this point in the story, they've all arrived at the camp. They've found their dormitories, they've got all their stuff settled, they've gone back outside where the instructors, and the head instructor is called Lewis. The instructors have prepared a barbecue for them and like a nice cool bonfire. So they've had the barbecue, all the kids are sort of settling around the bonfire, and they're starting to get tired. So everyone soon finished eating and the sound of chatter began to rise. Lewis, the head instructor, moved closer to the fire so the flames cast dancing shadows across his face. His smile dropped away and one by one the kids fell silent. "Do you want to hear a story?" Lewis said, his voice serious. "One that will chill your bones." Pete looked at Krish, then leaned forward to see Nancy sitting beside him. They grinned at each other. They loved a creepy story more than just about anything else. "Then prepare yourselves," said Lewis, "for the Grey Lady." Exactly 50 years ago, Lewis began the story, the midnight bus from Winter's Reach to Harwood End disappeared. He paused and looked around at the kids. When the bus left Winter's Reach, there were just 2 passengers on board, Jack and Charlie Grady, coming home from their shift at the mine. The driver was halfway to Harwood End on the stretch of road by Heathland Camp when he saw a figure in his headlights. But the bus was in the middle of nowhere. With the heath on one side, the forest on the other, there was nothing around them for miles. No one spoke. Everyone waited for Lewis to continue. As the bus got nearer, the driver realised the figure was a woman standing in the road, so he stopped and opened his door. The woman wore a grey cloak and had long grey hair hanging from under her headscarf. Her skin was grey, as if she'd been in the cold too long, and even her eyes were grey. The woman carried a grey blanket in her arms. The bus driver asked if she was okay, but all she said was, "Did you steal my baby?" Lewis took a deep breath. Well, the driver took pity on the woman. Lewis went on, but when she came on board and the bus set off, the air turned so cold that Jack and Charlie Grady couldn't stand it. They asked the driver to let them off, and they walked the last few miles home to Harwood End. Lewis leaned forward and lowered his voice. The next day, Jack and Charlie heard that the midnight bus never reached Harwood End. So they told the local police officer about the woman in grey. They said that the thing that spooked them most about her was that her eyes glowed and she seemed to float when she came onto the bus. It was as if her feet never touched the ground. A few kids shifted nervously on their tree stumps. "The police found the bus later that day," said Lewis. "It had run off the road and crashed into a dry stone wall. The driver was dead at the wheel, and there was no sign of the woman in grey. But the strangest thing was that the driver was totally decayed, as if he'd been dead for 100 years. Now, legend has it that the woman in grey is still out there, searching for her baby. And if you stare into the heath at night and say, "Grey lady, I stole your baby," 3 times, she'll appear and The scream took them all by surprise as something big pushed past Pete and landed by the fire with a thump. With wild grey hair, it wore a grey cloak. It waved its arms and screeched, "Who stole my baby?" Nancy backed away. Krish put his hands over his head and Pete looked about for a weapon. All the kids jumped up, trying to escape in every direction. But then the grey lady reached up and tore off her hair. "Ha! Gotcha!" she yelled. It took a moment for everyone to realise they'd been pranked. The grey lady wasn't a ghost at all. It was Jenny, one of the instructors wearing a cloak and a wig. "Hey, you should have seen your faces," she said, waving the wig at them. "You guys totally peed your pants." Lewis fell off his seat laughing. Miss Barker was in fits, and even Mr. Craven managed to smile. When everyone had settled down, they toasted marshmallows over the fire pit, chattering about how good the prank was. The instructors went around meeting the kids and getting to know them. Lewis came to sit with Pete, Nancy and Krish and asked if they'd enjoyed the story. "It was all right," Krish said, "not that scary." "Oh, I thought it was great," Nancy told Lewis. "Really scary." "And perfect for a night like this," Pete said as he gulped down his last marshmallow. "Are you going to tell ghost stories on the night walk?" "Definitely," Lewis said, smiling. "And are we going to those old buildings I saw in the forest?" Pete asked. "I bet there are some stories about that place." "The old Harwood Institute?" "That's too dangerous," Lewis warned. "Those buildings are falling apart. Anyway, the forest is out of bounds." And that's all I'm going to read. So if you want to know what's going to happen, if you want to find out the truth behind the Beast of Harwood Forest, you'll have to read the story. Bye.